Young was the third overall pick in the NFL draft. He signed a contract worth more than $50 million. More than $25 million of that guaranteed on day one before ever taking a snap in the NFL. Yet, if you fast forward a few years later, Young was out of the NFL. Young was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And it would lead you to the question of, how does this even happen? But outside of the headlines, outside of what you saw on ESPN, there was a whole different story to Vince Young. You see, Young had grown up on the streets. He was trying to simply make a better life for his family. He had a dad who wasn't around, and he didn't have any financial foundation in place when he came into tens of millions of dollars. And this story, and this lesson, is one that every athlete needs to understand, because it's one that I see time and time again. Let's dive in. The day that Vince Young signed that contract, he did what most young athletes do. He took the keys and he handed them over to somebody else, a combination of his financial advisor and his business manager, his uncle. Now, Young wasn't sitting there reviewing statements. He was looking at the playbook. He wasn't looking at what investment options he had on the table. He was trying to figure out how he could win his first game as a rookie. And look, I get it. As a former athlete, I've been there. As a financial advisor to professional athletes, I see this time and time again. We want our athletes to be focused on the field. But the reality is that means we can't overlook everything that's happening off the field. And the critical mistake that Young started to make was he stopped reviewing every single aspect off the field. A house for his mom, 2 cars for relatives, spending upwards of $200,000 a month. His financial advisor was kind of telling a story that he once got an invoice, unannounced, for $176,000 for a sports car. And Young, he's famous for that $15,000 tab that he rang up at the Cheesecake Factory. Now look, I'm not here to judge any of those decisions because frankly, I've walked in those shoes. I know what those decisions look like. When you're at that age and when you're at that level of your game and those checks are coming in like that, you think they're never going to stop. And I get it. The amount of confidence that you have to be able to go out and perform on the field can lead to poor decisions off the field because all of a sudden that same confidence is leading to the fact that you think those checks will never end, when in reality, they do, and they often end way sooner than we ever think. And while Young was there, focused on football, focused on taking care of the people around him, nobody was holding everybody else in the team accountable. Nobody had any checks and balances in this system. And before you knew it, things started to fall apart. And here's where the story gets complicated. If we fast forward a few years, Young doesn't find himself on the football field. He finds himself in the courtroom, getting deposed on loans that apparently he never took out, on business deals that apparently he never signed off on. But here's the problem. His name was on those documents. And you know what I mentioned? He was focused on the field and he wasn't thinking about what was off the field. He took everything that he had worked so hard for and he handed it over to somebody with absolutely little oversight from himself. Now look, I'm not here to say exactly what happened. In fact, the court actually said that they weren't really sure what happened. There was a settlement that happened. There was no public findings. And his former financial advisor actually sued Young back. And during those depositions, it was Young who actually came out and said, you know, some of those loans, I think I probably did sign off on. And this goes back to my original point. If you think about Young, he's coming into tens of millions of dollars at an age where he has no financial experience. And all of a sudden, he's presented with opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And now you multiply that by the fact that you think these checks will never stop. And signing off on one loan, signing off on one business deal, it feels minimal. But over time, they start to stack up. And before you know it, Young is sitting there with no money to his name in a courtroom trying to pay off his debts. So what's the truth in this scenario? Honestly, I'm not sure if we'll ever know. But here's the lesson I want every athlete to understand, is that we have to be focused just as much off the field as we are on the field. Now, I'm not sitting here and telling you you need to be managing your own money. In fact, I would advocate against that. With that being said, you need to make sure that you understand what's going on. And I go back to a quote that my mom gave me when I first signed. She said, Jacob, we will help you build the team of people around you. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility because it is your money. And every single athlete I work with, I tell them that same quote. Because at the end of the day, you've worked really hard for this money. God has given you an incredible ability to be able to earn money from playing a sport on the field. And while this might not be your area of expertise, while this doesn't have to be your day-to-day, you do need to be thinking about what's going on off the field just as much as you're thinking about what's going on the field. Now, just when you thought this story might be over, there's a redemption story in this. You see, Young, after filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, after squandering tens of millions of dollars, after getting released from the Packers in 2013, when the GM actually came out and said, this didn't totally have something to do with on the field, but he really needed to clean up everything that was happening off the field. You see, the money had become a distraction. And it had become a distraction because he had never focused on it on the first place. And Young, he got off the mat. He hired a new financial team. He started to delve in new endeavors into real estate. And he started to slowly pay off his debts, one by one. But more importantly, he started to take account for what was actually happening in his own financial life. By 2017, he was playing in the Canadian Football League, earning roughly $100,000 per year. This is a man who at one point was guaranteed more than $25 million in the NFL, playing for roughly $100,000 per year. And honestly, I think this is the most important part of the story. It wasn't the bill that came in for the Ferrari. It wasn't the Cheesecake Factory tab. It wasn't the business loans that he said he didn't sign off on. It was the redemption story that Young, who was once a high-flying, Heisman Trophy winning, third overall pick in the draft, was now getting off the mat and rebuilding his life one day at a time. And the entire lesson in all this isn't that Young ever had to be some financial expert or some financial guru or be doing all this on his own, but it was that he had to be checking in. He had to have some oversight. He had to have checks and balances within his financial life to understand that all the hard work that he was putting in on the field was actually being rewarded off the field. Because this is what I see time and time again with athletes. We sign, we hand over the keys, and we really don't have any idea what's going on. If you're an athlete out there and the answer to this question isn't clear, you might need to take a second look. What are you doing with your money? And if your answer is simply, I have a guy, I'm here to tell you that's not enough. Because we have one chance as professional athletes to do this right. We have one chance in our 20s and 30s. And if we make a financial mistake, this isn't like stubbing our toe. This is like breaking our leg. One shot to do it right. So for as much time and as much energy as you are focusing on the field, you also need to be thinking about what you're doing off the field. Because I'm here to tell you that you're going to be a former athlete a lot longer than you're going to be a current athlete. As always, my goal is to help you get smarter with your money. Until next time, my friends.